And we're going to bring you a bit more on that story right now, because the palace have confirmed that someone in an honorary but senior role has now stepped aside. I'm going to read you out part of the transcript put out by Ngozi Fulani from the charity Sistah Space. Now, she says the conversation with the royal aide went something like this. "Where are you from?" And Ngozi says, "Sistah Space." "No, where do you come from?" says the royal aide. "We're based in Hackney." "No, what part of Africa are you from?" And it continues like that for some time. And Ngozi says that she's British and was born here, and is then asked, "No, but where do you really come from? Where do your people come from?" Well, we can speak now to Mandu Reid, the leader of the British Women's Equality Party, who was at that event and heard those comments. Mandu, really appreciate you spending a bit of time with us on 5 News tonight. Can I ask you, is that your recollection of that conversation? And if that is the case, how uncomfortable was it to hear that?
Yes, that's exactly as I recall it, and it was deeply uncomfortable. It was a prolonged interaction. It wasn't fleeting, it wasn't just for a few seconds. There was this persistent line of inquiry, persistent series of questions. Ngozi's answers were repeatedly treated as if they weren't good enough or perhaps weren't even true. And it did feel like she was being interrogated. It was extremely uncomfortable for her, and I was standing right next to her. I'm a black woman. There's another woman standing next to her, a woman called Daisy, also a black woman. It instantly changed the atmosphere for us and tainted our experience of being at this really important gathering that's about a really important subject. We felt like perhaps we are being treated as trespassers. And so, yeah, it was a really bad start to what should have been an important event, an important gathering.
I'm sure you've seen some of the responses from the palace this afternoon. One from the Prince of Wales saying, a spokesperson there, "Racism has no place in our society," and the comments made at Buckingham Palace reception were unacceptable. That's from the Prince of Wales. Buckingham Palace maintain that they've reached out to Ngozi on this matter and are inviting her to discuss all elements of her experience in person if she wishes. Now, up until a while ago, we were under the impression that she had still not received that correspondence. Do you know that to be the case? Has there been reaching out from the palace to Ngozi?
I don't know. I haven't heard directly from Ngozi about that.
And how do you feel about their response? They've obviously spoken to the person in question who you were part of that conversation with, and they have stepped down and apologised. Is that enough?
I think it's really interesting how quickly they responded. But I think the response, I have some issues with the response. I don't want to see the woman in question step down. I want to see her step up. I want to see everyone around her and everyone in the royal household step up and acknowledge that institutional racism, the kind of dynamics we experienced, are a real problem and have really damaging effects for people like me, people like Ngozi, who are interacting with the royal household. I think this idea of her stepping down perhaps is an attempt to minimize it, perhaps is an attempt to reduce it. It reminds me of that bad apple narrative. It reminds me of that this is an isolated incident narrative, which we see when we're talking about the Metropolitan Police or the Fire Brigade or other institutions that have racism and misogyny baked into how they operate. So, no, I want to see some real engagement. I want to see a real acknowledgement, and I want to see them do some reflection and actually commit to doing better, changing the institution, changing the culture within that institution, and showing real leadership at a time of real increasing division and polarization in our country on these subjects.
And can I ask you briefly, I know this is probably a hard one to answer briefly, but what does that incident you witnessed yesterday, what does that show you in the light of what we saw Meghan Markle talk about in the royal family during that Oprah Winfrey interview, do you think?
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot today. I think it really validates the account Meghan Markle and Prince Harry gave of their experiences. Bear in mind, I was at a reception which just lasted a few hours over an afternoon. Imagine dealing with similar dynamics over days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months. I think it is, it kind of corroborates what they explained they had to endure and deal with. And I think it's a demonstration of how serious this is, how much of a big issue it is, and how it needs a response that's more substantive than symbolic to deal with it.